Mike, did you get the part where we were talking about if it was just a fight in the alley, that there really would be no problem?
I'll bring that up again.
Okay.
All right, folks, we're sorry about that. We had a catastrophic failure on our part. We usually like to blame somebody else for those technical failures, but this one was our end. While we were off the air, Keith and Stu were having a very interesting conversation about what may have happened and what that would mean. You guys want to pick up on that again, about what if a fight broke out?
Well, all I said was that even if we're talking about Thatcher runs out because he's desperate, everybody says that there's no question that they told him that he was going to lose his license, so he had a reason to run. If he didn't run off the roof, he ran out of the door. And let's say they did struggle outside, and the officer did hit him with the flashlight. It's really not a big deal. This happens. He's a drunk guy. He might be very violent. He knows that he's going to lose his license. Those are facts. And if it happened whereby the officer hit him with the flashlight in the head during a physical struggle, it really wouldn't be such a big deal. But to make up a story like this, it kind of stinks a little.
You're a cop, okay? Are you going to readily admit that you struck a prisoner in the head, causing his death, and no witnesses, and you're going to be facing possible first-degree murder? A prosecutor can infer malice. They can infer you did it out of anger. You have to prove you didn't. No cop is going to want to face that choir.
So we got to remember this is 1983. The tenor was very different back then. Right now we talk about the tenor that police are afraid to act post-Ferguson. There's instances now when an officer's involved in a shooting, the first thing I hear the media asking is, has a police officer been indicted? When did we used to hear that, Keith? Did you ever hear that when officers were involved in shootings asking for indictment? We usually wonder what happened, and we used to at least give the benefit of the doubt to the officer. Would you agree?
It used to be. Used to. Yeah.
I agree. Back in 1983, I don't think they would worry if they were in a fight, legitimately protecting themselves, that the tenor would be so negative as it might be today.
Listen, there's no video outside that station house, that police facility. I guarantee that there was no video. They could have made up a better story than the one they made up if this is what we're sticking with.
I agree.
Right.
Yeah.
So Stu, you want to have this case prosecuted. There is no statute of limitations for murder. So we have who will investigate? Will the police investigate it? Will the state police investigate it? Who will take on a murder investigation?
Okay, good question, Mike. As I said, after we got the verdict, I went to the Attorney General in Des Moines, and the FBI was assigned to investigate. It took a 1.5 year investigation to finally make its report that the cops did no wrong, and Kevin Thatcher did indeed do all these things they said he did. I then went to the state attorney in Marshall County, the county attorney of that county, and she passed the buck to the state attorney, Tom Miller. Tom Miller said to me, well, Mr. Pepper, you should have come to us first, not the FBI. Since they said no, well, that's tough. We're not going to do anything ourselves. So right now, all jurisdictions have shied away from taking the case on for pretty bad reasons, I think.
Okay, but now, Keith, I'm sure you're pretty familiar with the FBI coming in, post-incident, opening up a civil rights investigation. But Stu, a civil rights investigation is not a murder investigation, and I don't know the answer to this. I could have looked it up, but what is the statute of limitation for a federal civil rights violation, a violation under color of law? Has that passed?
Right. If it's murder, if it's second degree or first degree murder, there's no statute of limitations. In fact, it's a capital crime. First degree murder under color of state law.
For the state?
No, for the Fed. Under 1980, the state is a federal statute. A policeman can face a death penalty if they're charged with first degree murder under color of law under the Civil Rights Act. There's no statute of limitations.
I believe you said, Stu, before, though, that it wasn't an intentional murder.
Well, again, I don't know that. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt.
Example where the cover-up is much, if what we say is true here, the cover-up is much worse than the crime. And you can't really, right, but so you're really not going to be charging the crime of murder. You charge.
I want that. Plus, I want Daryl Templeton to be charged with accessory to murder after the fact. He is the one that covered up this murder by this cop, Daryl Templeton. And he is as culpable as a murderer for covering up this crime.
But wouldn't you have to prove the murder itself? Because now if they come back in and say, listen, you know what, we did conspire, we made this whole thing up, but this is how it happened. And they say, listen, it happened this way. We had a fight in the alley. I took my flashlight out. Go test your flashlight. You'll see his DNA is on it. And that's what happened. Then you really have to prove the murder again. I mean, the anger and the anguish comes from the cover-up, not from the fact that Thatcher is dead. The problem...
No, that's a problem for me. Someone being murdered by a policeman in the alley.
I could deal with that better than I could deal with the conspiracy part, the ends that they went to for this.
So Keith, Keith, could we approach? Is this reinvestigatable, for lack of a better word? A lot of questions here. I don't think. Well, the federal government, the FBI, can only do it, as you said, if it's a murder, right, Stu, under the color of law. And Keith was saying, how are we going to prove the murder now? How would we investigate and bring a case of murder now, Keith? What's your thoughts on that?
Let me chime in. That's up to the grand jury. They should have a grand jury convene, which they were going to do, but they never did. At the beginning of this case, they subpoenaed witnesses under color of a federal grand jury, which was a farce. The FBI actually created fake subpoenas, convincing people a grand jury was going to be summoned. They never did. So this case was...
Wait. The FBI created fake subpoenas. What does that mean?
Well, okay, they created subpoenas that said that you are summoned as a witness before a federal grand jury. And they never had a grand jury summoned or convened for any witness. So they kind of fooled people thinking that they were supposed to talk because of a grand jury investigation going on. That's what I'm talking about.
That's the first time I hear something like that. Keith, what do you think?
I don't know anything about that kind of thing.
It's in the record. I swear to God, it's in the record. They issued subpoenas with, and so what I'm saying is, if Barry Bonds has a grand jury against him for one lie to Congress, here we have a prima facie case of murder or excessive force by a police officer. Why can't they have a grand jury convene to investigate this crime? The grand jury says, hey, no crime, fine. But at least let's have justice done the right way.
Right, Keith, you're a police officer now. We brought you back in. You're sworn. You're back up in that state. I've come to you with Stu in this case. What was your initial feeling be?
In terms of reopening the case?
Yes.
I'd reopen it. You reopen this case. I don't think that there's going to be any sort of prosecution. If you have some kind of investigative grand jury, you might want to do that. But as far as this is not a conspiracy to commit murder, Stu. This is a conspiracy and maybe a murder, but they didn't conspire to kill this guy. They conspired to cover up his murder, which doesn't make it a conspiracy to commit murder.
Well, what about an accomplice after the fact to murder? That's what Daryl Templeton was doing. He was creating evidence to throw off suspicion or culpability on his fellow officer. That, to me, under the law, not just to me, but under the law, that is as culpable of murder as the murderer.
Right.
Accessory after the fact.
Murder or manslaughter? Do we have murder here or manslaughter?
Right.
Well, that's up to the jury to decide. That's for a jury function to decide what level of crime was committed here.
All right, but looking at what we discussed here, I mean, the concept of premeditation, the intent, as opposed to getting in a fight and just maybe taking it too far. Keith, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'll ask Stu. Stu, do you think that Thatcher was intentionally murdered?
I don't think so. I'll be honest. I don't think so, because there wasn't enough time for him to devise. Unless he totally blew a gasket, got so angry, so hostile at that moment that he just wanted to let it all out, hit the kid as hard as he could, and the rest is history.
Right, and I agree. And then once again, we're back to the point where if this conspiracy did happen, the conspiracy is worse than the crime itself.
And right, and what and the next step is the FBI being part of the conspiracy, because they ratified the conspiracy. They ratified the cover-up that Templeton concocted that night.
How many people are in the Iowa office? I mean, in New York, once again, the office, the bureau's office, we have them all over, and we have a good relationship, or I always had a good relationship. What's the relationship with the office and the local police in Iowa? I don't know.
I'll tell you what.
1983, right? In '83 now.
Yeah. Okay. When I went to the Attorney General, I said I want an agent from either Kansas City, Chicago, Omaha, or Minneapolis to investigate this. I don't want a local FBI guy doing this. And that's exactly who they assigned to the case. A local guy who knew all these cops. He used them in his own investigations prior to this case. And so it was like he was in bed with these guys. And that's one of the problems of this FBI investigation.
So, Stu, you think that we have the FBI would have legal jurisdiction now to reopen a civil rights case, right?
Yes, exactly. Same as they had back in '83 when we first went to them.
And Keith, you think there's at least sufficient prima facie evidence to open up at least a manslaughter or murder investigation, at least open it up?
Just for we've just touched on something else. I'd say, listen, just to close the matter, I would have an investigatory, maybe grand jury convene. Now, that being said, 1983 is a long time ago. Evidence is tainted. People are tainted. Memories.
Memories are tainted, exactly. Memories are tainted.
And also, I think you're going to have a tough time ever convening. Now you're implying that the FBI was part of a conspiracy. I think you're going to have a tough time ever convening an investigatory, any kind of investigatory grand jury to go after the FBI.
Especially today.
Yeah.
I know exactly. I know exactly what you're saying, and this is what I've been living with for 30 years. In the hopes that maybe some honest FBI agent or somebody in the Justice Department will see the fallacy of this conclusion. A human body, the FBI basically is saying for history, a human body can fall right on their back 30 feet without injury. And that is not the way science is set up.
But Stu, don't you have your win already? You already won the wrongful death.
Well, but that's not my justice. I want this guy to go to jail for what he did. I want them to face, like anybody would face if they did the same act. Just because he's a police officer and the FBI cleared him doesn't mean this guy should not be punished for what he did. And Darrell Templeton and Detective David Galloway, who also concocted the stories, and on and on and on, these men should face punishment like anybody else would have to face if they did the same thing.
Well, that's funny you say that, because I don't believe that, anyone John Q. citizen would be facing any kind of civil rights, a civil rights violation for this. It would only be if they were cops, and I think that's the problem here for you. Tell me if I'm wrong, that they are cops, and that's the problem.
And the FBI being cops also, yes. Yes.
Stu, have you, since 1983, the Office of the District Attorney has turned over many times. Have you recently gone to the current District Attorney of the proper jurisdiction and asked for a grand jury or some investigation on this matter?
No, not in the last 3 or 4 years. I did about 4 years ago, but not since then.
And is there a new District Attorney since then?
From Marshall County, I don't know. Maybe so. I have to check into that.
I think, and I'm going to speak for Keith, I think we agree that justice would be done here if at least it was investigated. And you had a chance, and the family had a chance to see this thing through. But I think the odds of something happening or coming about are small. Keith, your thoughts?
I think that the odds are small, but you never know. Somebody on their deathbed might want to see Jesus and tell you exactly what happened that night. So there's, I think that's your real chance of anything getting of closure.
Oh, that could happen if an investigation is reopened. The agent in charge could re-question all these people. To me, it's a cold case. Okay, I've been living with a cold case murder for 30 years, and cold cases are never ended, as far as I know. In fact, one recently was solved. 5 men were indicted for murdering a black man in 1982 in South Carolina. So they were able to catch these guys. So why not, in my case, same thing? You know, it's got to get.
What kind of ground roots movement can you? I'm sorry, not Keith, Stu. What kind of ground roots movement can you do to maybe put some pressure on the current DA to open up a new investigation, or even the FBI?
Well,
have you gotten the media involved? Sometimes it takes some public pressure to get it done.
Well, the Des Moines Register editorial about 3 or 4 years ago also reaffirmed that the case should be reinvestigated, reopened. So the Des Moines Register newspaper, who covered the trial every day, still wants an investigation.
I think stick with them. Get some pressure on might work. Keith, any suggestions to what he could do to get some pressure on the authorities?
You got me on this. Do you know where the police officers are now?
Yeah, they still live in I believe, in Marshalltown, still in that area.
They're retired already. I mean,
they're retired, right. And Aldred was eventually fired for misusing a handgun on somebody, threatening his wife. But he was fired for misconduct shortly after this case came down.
Yeah. All right, guys, it's been a great thing. It's time to kind of wrap it up. We've gone over time. We had a tremendous audience. But Keith, I want you to kind of jump in here with me on this. I want to point out we're talking about 2 police officers in 1 police department in 1983. We shouldn't draw conclusions about police at large. At large, we should not develop any negative hostile attitudes to the police based on what we're showing here. As a matter of fact, you have 2 former law enforcement officers, Keith and I, willing to take, a very critical look with the jaundiced eye at what happened there. So please don't develop any negative or see this as a reason to be hostile to cops, just because we are taking an honest look at what happened years ago by 2 police officers in 1 police department. Keith, could you maybe just add on to that?
Mike, I think you hit it right on the head. It's just like anything else. You have a lot of cops in a lot of departments, just like they're bad lawyers, they're bad doctors, there's bad in all of us.
All right, let me tell you this regarding.
You're not telling me they're bad lawyers, are you?
I know a lot of police officers, and they all agree with what our version of what happened. A detective, homicide detective Lee Bouchard, his report is on the website coverup.net, which explains the entire case. He wrote an opinion, 5-page opinion, detailing all the facts that there was a murder in the alley. Dr. Cyril Weck, who is a world-renowned forensic pathologist, he gives lectures everywhere. Also wrote a report confirming that this was murder in the alley. So it's not police on our side. Des Moines police on our side during the case. In fact, Kevin Thatcher's grandfather was a policeman for Des Moines 25 years. He came from a policeman's family. He had nothing against the police, only against what happened to his son's violence.
We understand that. I think, Keith, I'm sorry, Stu, what I'm saying is I think you're going to need, again, some strong support, and maybe go on change.org. And what I'm committing to right now is after this show, I will continue to work with you to try to find ways to get more support for this and maybe bring this to the right authorities there and maybe get this case reopened. Okay?
I tried to contact the Senate Judiciary Committee, the committee that oversees the FBI. I wrote letters to all the members years ago telling them about the case. If I can get one senator from that committee to seriously look into this case and have the FBI explain how they could come to this conclusion, I'd be satisfied with that.
Okay, and we'll talk about that. So, Keith, I'm sorry, Keith, you have something?
No,
I'm sorry. All right, so the coverup.net, Stu, that's where you have more information about the case for anyone who's interested. And a few years ago, you produced a movie about this case.
Yes, exactly.
I watched it. Pretty good flick for not being Cecil B. DeMille or whatever. Good work. Thank you for coming on. Keith, your expertise was invaluable tonight. Thank you so much. I think
thanks, Mike.
Hey, take care, Keith. Nice talking to you.
Be well.
Thank
All
you,
right,
guys.
thanks,
I'll talk
Mike.
to both you guys later. Thank you,
All right,
guys.
talk to
Good
you
night. Hey, everybody. Thank you for watching. Thank you for sticking out through our little technical problems there. Most of you did come back. We appreciate that. Next week I'm going to be on vacation, and I told my wife we'll do this from the hotel room, and my wife said, I don't think so. So we won't be doing that. So that explains two things. One, why we won't have a show, and two, why am I still married after 30 years? But we will show a rerun of one of the more popular shows next week. The week after that, we'll be discussing guns on campus, letting college students walk around with guns. Is that a good idea? And after that, we will be talking, the week after that, we'll be talking about Oppo research. That's going after your opponent, as we see in the news today, political climate, and the Trump dossier. Oppo research and the Trump dossier the week after that. We got some great shows coming up with some great guests, and we've had a great audience, another record-breaking audience out there tonight. Thank you very much, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Good night. Oh, yes, please. my manager's saying, don't stop yet. Please go by our Facebook page. Give us likes for Crimes and Times. And please go onto that YouTube channel, please, and subscribe. We need 100 subscribers so we could put this out on more platforms. We've been growing, and we want to continue that growth and accelerate it, and we need your help. Thank you so much. Good night.